Hello, I'm Sevil Mikhailova.
And I'm Claude Salhani, and this is This Week in Focus.
This week we will focus on the most important event of deal which was achieved between Iran and P5+1.
The deal achieved between Iran and the P5+1, the P5+1 being the permanent members of the UN Security Council, the United States, Russia, France, England, and China, and the +1 being Germany, have signed this deal where they've lifted the 30-year sanctions on Iran, and there's been a lot of controversy of people saying, yes, it's good, no, it's not good.
There were doubts even.
There were lots of doubts, and there still are doubts of whether this is good or bad for the region.
And whether it will fail or it should go on, succeed.
Whether it will fail, whether it will succeed, whether Iran is going to ignore it and continue full speed ahead and get its nuclear bomb, which it very badly wants.
Anyway, this long-awaited nuke deal has been achieved, and let's look at the sides of this deal, how things would go on after signing of this deal.
We have with us this week Peter Roff, who is a contributing editor with U.S. News and World Report in Washington, D.C. Peter also is one of the most knowledgeable people that I know who knows everything about the workings of the U.S. government. He's worked in government before. And without further ado, let's turn to Peter. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the show.
Good evening. It's nice to be here.
Peter, what is your take on this? Do you think President Obama has done something right or wrong, or why was he so eager to push this through at this last moment? Is he looking for to leave on a positive note, where in foreign policy he has hardly accomplished anything?
Well, there are a couple of things at play here. Number one, I think that the United States and the P5+1 in general have bought a pig in a poke. For roughly 30 years, it has been the stated policy of the United States government to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. That policy is no longer operative. The new policy under Obama is to have advance notice of when Iran is going to develop nuclear weapons. I think that increasingly militarizes an already unstable area of the globe, and in fact probably kicks off some kind of nuclear arms race in the Middle East, because I cannot imagine that the Israelis, the Saudis, perhaps even the Indians, looking in the other direction, can be very sanguine about a nuclear-armed Iran with the capability to deliver missiles. As far as Obama is concerned, my theory is that he is at a point in his presidency where he is looking to shape his legacy. Now, he has talked on and off about bringing Iran back into the family of nations since the 2008 campaign. He spoke early in his presidential run the first time of meeting with representatives of the Iranian government with no preconditions, which went over very badly here in the United States and forced him off topic. So part of this is what every president does, a search for a legacy, some substantive accomplishment that will be next to his name in the history books.
Absolutely. We saw the same thing with Bill Clinton when he tried at the last minute to do something on the Middle East talks.
And North Korea, yes, that's correct.
Peter, do you believe that this nuke deal will prevent Iran's having nuke bombs and also bring some dividends, some political dividends to Obama?
I do not think that it will prevent Iran from obtaining the ability to manufacture nuclear weapons. We know that they have the ability to deliver them because they have working missiles. I think that it causes enormous problems for the president within his own party and his own coalition, because the American Jewish community votes very heavily for the Democrats in presidential elections as well as congressional elections. And the American Jewish community is largely very unhappy with this deal as they see it threatening Israel. There's a lot of pressure, for example, right now on New York Senator Chuck Schumer, who is the man who will lead the Democrats in the U.S. Senate in the next Congress. Schumer is an ally of the Jewish community, a member of the Jewish community, and there is a lot of pressure on him now from his friends and supporters to oppose the president. But as the man who is in the position to be the next minority leader of the U.S. Senate, the president's man in the upper legislative chamber, that is a very hard thing for him to do.
Peter,
and so he right now is walking a very fine line.
Peter, do you think that it will encourage Saudi Arabia to acquire a bomb, Egypt to acquire a bomb?
Absolutely. My fear is that what this treaty will do is set off an arms race in what is the most, as I said, unstable region of the world.
Now, the next president of the United States in a year and a few months' time, will he or she have the possibility to undo the deal that was done?
Well, the next president can always withdraw, but I'm not sure that you can put the genie back in the bottle. One of my concerns, and something that is now being talked about actively by policymakers in Washington, is the amount of support for terror groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and others that the Iranian government can now provide with the $150 billion or so that are going to be unfrozen.
Yeah.
That too is a game changer,
yeah.
And it's a high intensity, low tech game changer that can be destabilizing not just in the Middle East, not just in Iraq or Israel or Syria, but frankly around the world.
So, Peter, you just mentioned that it will undermine security. So it turns out this nuke deal can undermine security in the region. So what are the positive sides then of the deal? So it should have, Rouhani said that it is a win-win deal. What does he meant by saying that?
I think what he meant is that that Iran gets their sanctions lifted, they get to engage in commercial activity globally now, once again, along with the fact that they really don't have to do anything to stop their progress towards obtaining nuclear weapons. I do think that on a positive side, in terms of lifting the sanctions, to the extent that it lifts the Iranian upper and middle class, who we know do not like the rule of the mullahs, who would like to take Iran in the steps it was headed before the revolution was subverted by the Ayatollah Khomeini and his supporters towards a true democratic system, that if this empowers them to better resist the secret police and the government, then I think that's a net benefit if it ultimately leads to freedom in Iran. I think, however, that the likelihood of that happening is very small compared with the reality of Iran obtaining the ability to manufacture nuclear weapons and joining the family of nuclear nations. And there's very little. This will be, if you discount the activities of the Soviet Union during the Cold War, this will really be the first time that a state sponsor of terrorism is verified to be in possession of nuclear weapons, and that is a global destabilizer.
Do you not think, Peter, that it's a little bit of a hype to think that Iran can really destabilize with nuclear weapons? Because let's assume that they get to the point where they can't produce them. How many bombs can they produce? When you think of how many bombs the United States has, France has, Great Britain has. Great Britain has about 400 nukes. France has about 350. U.S. has over 1,000.
Well, there used to be a bumper sticker in the United States that said, "One nuclear bomb can ruin your whole day." And that's the fear here, that Iran manufactures a nuclear weapon, and instead of putting it on a missile and launching it from Tehran to Tel Aviv or Rome or Paris, puts it on a truck that's driven by some third-party terror group into a marketplace in Tel Aviv or put on a ship that's brought into Los Angeles Harbor and set off. That's what I think most people in America who are concerned about the deal are concerned about. What will happen to the weapons once they are manufactured? You know, here in the United States, we spent a significant amount of money in a period of cooperation with the Russians to clean up their old nuclear sites in the former Soviet Union. The purpose of that was to make sure that no fissionable material was left lying around to fall into the hands of terrorists, separatist groups, or anyone that shouldn't have them. In fact, there was an international agreement between the Brits and the Russians, the United States, and the Ukrainians to guarantee the territorial integrity of Ukraine, which has subsequently been violated by the Russians, in exchange for the newly independent Ukraine letting the United States and the Russians come in and take all the nuclear weapons out.
Let me play devil's advocate here for a second, Peter. If they do that, nuclear bombs can be identified. We know where they come from. And if they do that, don't they know that there's going to be massive retaliation?
Yes. They're probably aware of that, but
I don't think
we are dealing with. There are certain groups in this world who believe that there is nothing more noble, more holy, more important than to die for their faith.
Yeah, but I don't think the government of Iran fits in that category. I think they support sometimes groups that have that belief, but I don't think that they are. They won't.
Suicidal?
Suicidal, yeah.
Well, remember that the previous president, Ahmadinejad, promised on more than one occasion to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, which can be done with 2 or 3 nuclear weapons rather easily. This is not a threat that can be ignored.
Absolutely, but I think the retaliation would be 10 times worse.
If the nations of the world chose to retaliate in kind.
Yeah.
And there's not necessarily a guarantee that they would retaliate in kind.
Peter, let's look at the scene from the U.S. So as we all understand, this nuke deal will bring some strength to Iran, so both economically, politically, and it will have some dividends. So what does strengthening Iran promise to the region?
Well, with the United States having departed Iraq, there is a vacuum of power in the region that Iran is trying to fill. Mm-hmm. For the last 30 years, that role has really been filled by the Saudis, at least in my judgment, that they have been the dominant power in the region. Mm-hmm. And any time you have a shift, particularly a competitive shift, which is what's happening now as Iran, for example, is supporting the Islamic State group, as Syria is being destabilized. And there is once again a competition for control of vast portions of Iraq. That anytime you have a period of instability, you can end up with outcomes that are not in line with what you had before, the destabilization, if you will. And so one hopes, one prays that Iran will be a good global citizen thanks to this agreement, but the record over the last 30 years, I think, creates what we call in the United States a reasonable doubt that they will do so.
Peter Roff, contributor to U.S. News and World Report, thank you very much for being with us today. We appreciate
My pleasure.
it.
Anyway, I'm happy with this nuke deal. At least in one point of the world, the powers could come to an agreement and are eager to eliminate this disagreement with one country.
I'm glad you are glad about it, because I'm not glad about it, because I'm a pessimist in this. You're the optimist, I'm the pessimist in this.
Right.
Because I think that it will create an arms race, a nuclear arms race. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt will certainly want to have their own bomb now that Iran's going to have its bomb. So I think it just builds up more danger.
Claude, this is supposition, but the reality can be different from those you say.
Well, I certainly hope that your reality is the one that comes to pass and not my reality.
Because even 30 years ago, even 10 years ago, it was unbelievable that the U.S. and the West will come to an agreement with Iran. But now we are living this historic event.
I hope that what you're thinking comes to pass and not what I'm thinking comes to pass, because otherwise it would not be very good. So in supporting your idea, here's wishing you a better tomorrow.
Goodbye.